I met my husband 6 years ago when we both had just graduated college. He was a lovely guy, handsome and very well put together. He loved muscle cars and weightlifting, and I loved everything about him. I fell in love with him instantly and was over the moon when he asked me to marry him. A year into our marriage, I became pregnant with our son and gained about 30 pounds. I was 5 feet 3 inches, 125 pounds before the baby and 155 pounds after the baby. I still fit into the same clothing sizes, so I didn't think I had gained too much weight and that it would come off with breastfeeding and some more exercise. After the baby, my husband started pressuring me to lose the weight. He said that his friends were making comments about how fat I had gotten and that he was not as attracted to me as he was before I had the baby. He gave me an ultimatum that I either would have to lose the 30 pounds in 6 months or he would leave me. I was very upset about the demand, but I didn't want to lose him, so I tried my hardest to lose the weight. Every day for months I would wake up and go to hot yoga for 90 minutes. After I got home from work, I would run or do some bodyweight exercises. I tried to keep my calorie count below 1200 so that I would lose 2 or more lbs per week. The weight slowly but surely started to come off and I was back down to 130 pounds by the end of the 6 months. My husband was happy and things looked like they would be okay. After I lost the weight, I noticed a shift in the attitude of my husband's friends. Most of them are perfectly nice guys, but a few of them are absolute pieces of shit, the same ones who called me fat. Once I returned to my old weight, these friends started to make comments about me and how sexy I was. I told my husband to make them stop and he said that he would speak with them, but the rude comments never stopped. I channeled all of my frustrations into working out and I lost an additional 15 pounds of body fat and got more toned. This past weekend, my husband's friends were over at the house and one of them grabbed me and tried to grope me. I told my husband, and even though he was angry at his friend, he was still angry at me. My husband said that I was leading his friends on by losing so much weight, and that I was trying to make myself skinny so that I could cheat on him. I was disgusted by this accusation and packed my bags and left for my mom's house. Last night, my husband called me and begged for me to come back home. He says that he knows that he was unfair and that he won't let his friend come over anymore. But I am so tired of dealing with this that I'm not sure I want him back. He's the one that told me to lose weight. But now he's blaming me for being too skinny and I'm afraid he's going to make me develop an eating disorder. But I also still love my husband and it hurts me to be apart from him. About a week after my post, I planted a wall of blackberries and raspberries at the 2 sides of my garden facing the driveway, about 30 centimeters from the edge so no overhanging branches. On the other side of the berry wall I planted lots stuff like strawberries and tomatoes. To reach the tomatoes and strawberries from the driveway you have either go through the fruit bushes or walk up to my house. Walk about 2 m along the side of the house and my windows and then walk into my actual garden. Not something you do by mistake. For about 2 weeks it was somewhat quiet, but I still found the kids on my driveway every single days. As far as I know they did not enter the garden and I hadn't noticed them walking around my house anymore. So I figured the bushes were working. About 1 week ago berry season started and my bushes are now full of raspberries and there's lots of strawberries as well. The neighbors noticed. First I caught the boys picking and eating raspberries, so I told them off and dropped them off at home, told their mom I caught them stealing. That's how I see it, even though it's fruit, and that I'd call the cops next time. She huffed and told me to grow up, but took the boys inside anyway. After that it was quiet up until yesterday afternoon, when I went out for a while and found the dad and his 2 sons right in the middle of my garden when I returned, clearing my bushes and plants. I didn't even confront them, just called the cops from a distance as they hadn't noticed me yet and started filming them after making the call. Luckily 2 cops showed up after 10 minutes or so and they confronted the neighbor as they were still picking berries. They told them they were trespassing and that the berry picking was in fact considered stealing and that I could press charges. For the first time I noticed a bit of fear in my neighbor. He was having trouble finding his words and kept looking back at his house. I guess hoping his wife would show to yell at the cops. They all went inside with the cops, so I just went home as well. After a while the cops came by and asked me if I wanted to press charges. I asked them if they felt like they scared the neighbor enough to stay away. I got a small smile and yes, about him, but the wife had just kept shouting at them and her husband about the little living next door. I told them no for now, asked them if I'd be allowed to get an extra camera set up on the wall between my garden and the road, to cover the entire front garden plus driveway. They said that's allowed as long as it's on my side of the wall. So, now I'm getting an extra camera installed. One neighbor knows I'm done messing around, but his wife isn't there yet, and if I ever catch any of them again, the cops will be called and possible charges will follow. So I live in a flat with 3 other people, childhood best friend, a guy from my uni course and his cousin. For the most part we get along really well and rarely have disagreements. However, this has been a real point of contention lately. About 6 months ago I began a relationship with a guy I've known for a couple of years. I know it's still a fairly new relationship, but I really like him. He makes me really happy and we're pretty serious about each other. Up until recently, he would come visit me at my flat 3 to 4 times a week. This was mostly due to the fact that I have chronic fatigue and going on proper dates can be really challenging for me. Instead of going out to dinner or a film or whatever, we'd just chill in my room or the living room, watch TV and get takeout or cook together. I didn't really consult anyone about this, Bex say. All the other flatmates have their partners over as often if not more so, and B, he rarely spends the night and usually leaves before 10 p.m. because of his work schedule. So the issue, 2 weeks ago, comes to me and tells me that I need to stop having my boyfriend over because it's starting to get annoying. I asked her why and she said it's irritating to have someone who doesn't live there skulking around all the time. I pointed out that her boyfriend sleeps over 3 nights a week and thus is here more often than mine, and she claimed that was different because they've been together for 11 years and are moving in together once her lease is up. She said she's discussed it with the other flatmates and they've all agreed he needs to stop coming over or he has to chip into the rent, because it's getting ridiculous. Note, nobody else's partner chips in on the rent. I confirmed with the other 2 that yes, this is an agreement they've made. Though my best friend said basically made her agree by threatening to cut off the Wi-Fi and utilities, which are in her name, if she didn't. I asked if this rule applies to everyone, but apparently it's just me. I pointed out that it's unfair and was basically told to deal with it. My potential assholery, I've begun loudly insisting that if my partner isn't allowed to come over, neither is anybody else's. If I answer the door to anyone's partner, I'll send them away. If I come home and someone's partner is there, I'll make a point to mention that I thought we weren't having partners who don't pay rent over anymore. I've asked boyfriend over and over how much rent he's paying and pretend to be affronted and make a fuss when he says he doesn't. Everyone's pretty pissed at me and is telling me I'm being unreasonable. I know I'm being petty, but I think it's unreasonable that there's one rule for me and another for everyone else, and I'm trying to make that point. Am I really the asshole here? Some questions people keep asking. If I knew of something my boyfriend was doing to be annoying / if anyone had told me that he was doing something, I'd have included it. I'm not aware of anything he does, and when I ask why I doesn't like him, I just get a shrug and just do. I will also state I'm bi, and she's never had an issue with any female partners I've had. We don't hang out in the living room much. We literally only use it if there's something we want to watch that I can't get on my bedroom TV and there's nobody else in there. We use the kitchen more often than the living room, but honestly even that isn't that often. We eat far too much takeout pizza rip. A lot of people seem confused, so just clearing up who's who in the situation. The one who brought all this up is not my best friend. Not to get too much into a tangent, but basically just over a year ago I was moving out of halls at university and was looking for a new place, so we decided to move in together. At the same time, a dude from my course was looking for a flat share. We couldn't find a 3-bed but found a really nice 4-bed, and he mentioned his cousin was also looking for somewhere to live, so she got on board too. I only met her last year and we don't really know each other very well. By chronic fatigue I mean chronic fatigue syndrome. Sorry, that's apparently so unclear. 6 years ago my son Matthew had a daughter with his now ex-wife Josie. I have always thought of Josie as my own daughter, so when they divorced 7 years ago due to my son cheating, I was conflicted and disappointed. Josie wasn't particularly close with any of her family, so my husband and I naturally took them in. Josie was an angel. She had insisted that we didn't have to lift a finger more than before we had taken them in, and though she was hurt, she kept civil around Matthew. My husband and I held a huge hand in raising their daughter Ruth, because Matthew remarried less than a year later and now has a 4-year-old son after disowning Ruth. 2 years ago my husband was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was hard on everyone, especially Ruth. They were extremely close. She told him about her girlfriends and boyfriends before anyone else and has always wanted him to be the one to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Matt rarely ever visited and didn't answer our calls, often saying that we had other kids, so it wasn't like my husband was dying lonely. Last night Matt stopped by to talk about inheritance. He never mentioned Josie nor Ruth and hinted that he thought he should get more inheritance than his siblings the entire time. My husband and I shared awkward looks until he decided to cut in. He explained that everyone would get a piece, but he'd focus more on Ruth and Bonnie, one of our other grandkids. Matt got angry and said that Ruth was just a bastard and that his son deserved more than her. My husband got furious after that and left the room saying that he wouldn't include Matthew at all. Matt yelled back and turned to me saying that Ruth wasn't worth it because she'd just grow up to be a whore like her mother. I told him that I'd rather have her mother as my daughter than him as my son and insisted that he leave. I'm getting phone calls from Matt's wife and family friends saying that my husband and I overreacted, and he was just angry that we were playing favorites. To clear some things up, Josie did not cheat on Matthew. Josie and Matthew met later in college and Josie was known as a party girl. Before that, Ruth isn't the product of an affair, but we are planning on getting a DNA test because what Matthew said has gotten under Ruth's skin. She was at the house when this occurred and overheard it. When it came to taking in Josie and Ruth, we didn't hesitate because Josie is not from here. She and Matt lived in another country until he moved them here a few months before he got caught cheating, and they had nowhere else to go as Josie was a stay-at-home mom. I had no intentions of choosing Josie over Matt then and now, and I never discouraged Matt from visiting. I tried to make it very clear that we weren't picking and choosing when we took Josie in. We just wanted her and our granddaughter to be safe and have a good home.